The Z7 is Nikon's first foray into the mirrorless full-frame market, and we're going to put it to the test. Welcome everyone, it is Andrew here from AppleInsider, and we have the new Nikon Z7 mirrorless camera, as well as two lenses and the F to Z adapter. We're going to walk you through all of this, show you how it can interface with your iOS and Mac products, and then we're going to give you a wealth of different sample shots and video for you to judge for yourself. In total, we bought three things. The Z7 kit, which includes the 24 to 70mm lens, the 35mm 1.8 lens, and the F to Z adapter. When you pick up the Z7, you're going to get a number of things inside the box, some old and familiar, and a few new things that are pretty exciting. So let's go ahead and check them out. We're not going to go through the whole unboxing process, but let's see what is included. Let's go ahead and walk through all of this gear one by one. Normally Nikons come with an actual battery charger, which this does as well, but this year we're also getting an external power adapter that you can plug directly into your camera. It folds flat and it uses USB Type-C. You no longer have to remove the battery from your camera to actually charge it up, so this guy can come in pretty handy. Next up, Nikon included an actual camera strap. They always do, but the ones for the Z series has this kind of different look to it. It's got that textured finish and the Z icon right there. So a little bit different strap for the Z series, but either way, we prefer to pick up our own, something from Picasso Labs or even Peak Design. Nikon included a USB cable to connect your camera to your computer or even to your iOS device. The old familiar MH25A battery charger is included, so you can pop the battery out of your camera and charge it in this thing if you so choose, or if you have multiple batteries, you can charge one in the camera and one in the external battery charger. The battery that's included is an EN-EL15B. So the common one is the EN-EL15s. This is a slightly updated version that can actually be charged inside of the camera. Then lastly, you have the camera itself. The Nikon Z7, it's really nice, really thin, fairly light for the size. Among all the other newer mirrorless full-frame DSLRs, this is the thinnest between the A7R III and the Canon EOS R. So speaking of those batteries, it does include the EN-EL15B, and it's a slightly modified version of the EN-EL15. The EN-EL15s will work just fine in the new Nikon Z7 or the Z6, but you're going to get slightly less power out of them than the 15B. The newer ones are also the only EN-L15s that will work being charged inside of the camera. As far as the ports go, on the left-hand side, you have the headphone jack on top, as well as the microphone input just below that. You have a second column that has the USB-C port right there on top. Mini HDMI used for video out for playing stuff or recording external audio or video, and then the remote button. So if you want to use a remote shutter mechanism, whether handheld or something else, that can be plugged in at the bottom. We do use the USB-C port most to actually charge up our camera, so we kind of wish that was at the bottom, but either way, it's just a layout kind of thing that we prefer. The USB-C port we can use to transfer images, or we can use it to charge our camera. What's really amazing, if you own a MacBook Pro, you can use your MacBook Pro's charger to charge up your Nikon. Don't have to worry about taking a separate power adapter or the battery thing. Literally just take your MacBook's charger. Let's talk about media and storage. The new cameras use XQD cards, which they've used in the past, but they're usually sidelined with a second SD card port. These new ones use exclusively XQD. They're a little bit taller and a little bit thicker than a standard SD card. They're also a whole lot faster, with read speeds up to 440 and write speeds up to 400 Mbps. In the future, after a firmware update, they'll even work with the new CF Express cards that are going to use the same body shape. Of course, that means if you're using Apple's old SD card adapter for your iPad or your iPhone, that's no longer going to work. You need to make sure you use the USB-A to Lightning adapter. You use this adapter, and then the USB-A to USB-C cable that came with your camera. You can plug your camera in and transfer a ton of content really fast. The updated adapters from Apple work with USB 3.0 on the iPad Pros, which can definitely speed things along. With iOS 12, Apple really streamlined the import user interface, and it makes it a lot better. Of course, you can also transfer stuff wirelessly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. There is only one card slot, but that's really necessary to keep such a small design. Some pros may not like that, but when I'm shooting an event, I usually have multiple cameras and multiple cards, so it's not a big deal. Going through some of the base specs, this thing is rocking the latest X-Speed processor, has a full frame 45.7 megapixel sensor, has an ISO range of 64 to 25,600, and work with the new Z-mount lenses that have a wider 55mm diameter. Among the lenses that came out at launch is the 50mm 1.8, the 35mm 1.8, and then the 24 to 70 f4. We particularly liked what Nikon did with this 24 to 70mm f4 lens. There's actually a little locking mechanism here, so it keeps the lens a lot more compact than it otherwise would be. When you go to use it, you kind of lock it out and it locks in at that 24 mark, and you can go all the way 24 to 70 moving freely. But when you lock it in at the end, you can't use it, but that lens is not going to extend without you, and it also just keeps it really nice and compact. Now, Nikon has a huge history of lenses, and there are only 3 lenses available at launch, which is why Nikon launched the FTZ adapter. This works with Z and F lenses and it connects them together. So if you have something like a legacy lens, like this giant 80 to 200 2.8 ED, you can still use them with the new camera. The new camera also has built-in 5-axis stabilization. So if you're using an older lens like this one here, you actually get one more axis for that VR. It's adding that roll in there, which gives you more stabilization. If you're using even older lenses that don't have VR at all, it adds 3-axis stabilization to those lenses. The adapter does add quite a bit of depth between the lens itself and the camera, as is necessary, but it really adds a huge wealth of lenses to this new camera system. There is one thing to be a little bit mindful of that we noticed. There was a super slight delay when shooting through the adapter than when it was actually connected directly to a camera. And really old lenses, like this legacy 1.4 50mm, they're not going to be quite as sharp. It's just a little bit of a hazing, just because these lenses were not designed for cameras with such high resolutions. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual layout and controls of the camera. On the top left-hand side, you have the dial to change exposure modes. Simply push down the button in the center and rotate it around. You have the common ones like manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, and programmed, as well as auto and 3 user preferences. On the right-hand side, you have the on and off, as well as the shutter, the recording video button, the ISO, and the exposure compensation, and then 2 different dials, one on the back and one on the front. When turned on, a small screen on the top gives you a little bit of vital information, including your aperture f value, your ISO, your shutter mode, the battery remaining, and even how many photos you can still take before your card is full based on the current settings that you've got set. The back of the camera is largely occupied by an articulating touchscreen. It makes it really easy to take photos whether you're looking at that screen or you go to look through the EVF. The screen is able to come out so you can see a little bit closer. It can rotate down or rotate up. It cannot move side to side at all, so you're a little bit limited in the movements. The touchscreen is 3.2 inches and has 2.1 million pixels. To go with the new touchscreen, Nikon came up with a completely new UI that takes advantage of all the different abilities like gestures and swiping that you can do. At the same time, the interface feels very familiar if you've used any of Nikon's cameras before. Let's go ahead and take a look at that interface and how easy it is to shoot. Let's dive in. We've got our screen turned on, we're in aperture priority mode, and certain things can be changed and certain things can't. The values that can be changed have a little box behind them, whereas the ones that can't, such as the shutter speed, don't. That makes it really easy to see what you can change and what you can't change right out of the gate, especially for anyone newer to Nikon's, very easy to understand. Tapping on the information button, you have a lot more options that you can change, including picture control, picture quality, the flash, the Wi-Fi toggle, the shutter or release mode, and the autofocus area mode. This camera is capable of shooting up to 9 frames per second when you're actually looking at that shutter release mode there. And some options have additional details that you can toggle into, and it makes it really easy to do that. So if you're shooting on a timer, you can actually choose to shoot multiple photos after that timer goes off. It's something you can get in there and customize without having to dig into a bunch of different menus. Focusing is really easy, just tap on the screen. Right now we're on that pinpoint autofocus mode, so it's super tiny and gives you really granular control over what you're actually trying to focus on. Focus speed was really quick, and we had autofocus on, had no problem picking up our subject very easily. Along the back of the camera, when you go to actually view photos, go into playback mode, and you can see all the images that you took in any videos that you've taken. Just swipe through, works very smooth. You can definitely tell that new processor really helps this thing kind of glide and fly and feel more like a smartphone than a legacy camera. Some stuff though is still buried in additional menus. Tap on that menu button and you have a very similar interface to a lot of other Nikon cameras. This part here feels very old school, kind of going back to a lot of really older Nikons, this stuff has not changed. So if you know where it is in the past, you're probably going to be able to find it here on the new models. Looking at some of the additional buttons you have on the back, top left you have the playback button and the trash button. On the top right you have the toggle between photo mode and video mode. You have the autofocus on button, a little joystick that you can move around, information button, multi-controller with the OK button, zoom in, zoom out, and there's the menu button down there in the bottom right as well. So lots of different controls, but all very familiar if you've used a Nikon. Inside of the Z7, we've got a lot of wireless connectivity. It works over Bluetooth low energy, or it works over wireless AC, including 5 GHz. It can transfer photos wirelessly a lot faster than it could in the past. When used with the SnapBridge application that has been updated for the Z7 and the upcoming Z6, there's a lot you can do. You can view the images that you've already transferred to your phone, upload them up into the Nikon cloud, or transfer additional photos. So when you go to transfer photos, it automatically bumps you into the Wi-Fi mode, which takes just a second to kind of switch over from Bluetooth into Wi-Fi, but it's fairly seamless when you actually do it. We found a video here that we want to move over. You just tap that video, tap on download, and it moves it. With images, you have the option of moving over smaller 2 MB files, or you can move over the originals. It's all very easy, and if you don't have any sort of adapter with you to plug it into your phone or into your iPad, this is a great way to do it. Lastly, within the app is remote photography. This can be really amazing when you're trying to get a picture from a little bit far away, or you want something where you're hands off with the camera and not firing the shutter by touching and moving the camera. Once you go ahead and launch this, which does work over Wi-Fi, you have a live view of the camera. You can even touch to focus what you want to focus on. Along the bottom, you have all the controls that you can adjust, including the shutter speed, your aperture f value, the exposure compensation, the ISO, and the white balance. Not all these can always be controlled, it just depends on what mode you're in. So in this case, we're in aperture priority, so I can't control the shutter speed. Tapping on the gear icon gives you a few other settings, including the self-timer. Along the top, you can change that exposure mode, so do we want manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, or programmed. We can change between the video mode and the photo mode. We can tap to focus on whatever we want to focus on in the photo itself. We can see the remaining image count and the battery on our camera. This has been a pretty big update for the SnapBridge application. It can also transfer the GPS metadata over to your photos, so it's really, really handy. I've used this a ton of times in the past, and it's more reliable and faster than ever on the Z7. We're not going to walk you through the whole process here, but you can wirelessly transfer your photos and videos from your Z7 to your Mac as well. Now it's time to look at some sample photos that we shot on the Nikon Z7, going between the 35mm 1.8 lens and the 24-70mm f4 telelens. Nikon has always been known for their lenses. It's one of the strongest suits that they've got going for them, and that really shows here in all of our sample photos. Shooting at night, we had very little noise. We were pretty amazed with all the noise reduction they were able to pull off. RAW looks really great, even though there is some lack of RAW support at the moment because the cameras are so new. It's a little bit quite difficult to deal with them. You have to use either Nikon software, or you can convert the images on the camera themselves. So aside from shooting amazing photos, as you've been able to see so far, the new Nikon is also pretty well suited for shooting video. It can shoot 4K video up to 30 frames a second, as well as 120 frames a second when you're shooting in 1080. As a first for Nikon, it can use that in-camera stabilization to stabilize your videos. So all these videos here that you're seeing, we actually shot completely freehand, and everything was very smooth. There was no stabilization done in post. It was all done just on the camera themselves, just moving it around. This is going to be a huge boon for videographers using the Z7. There's a lot of stuff that you'll be able to do just completely freehand, no gimbal or stabilizer necessary. It can shoot in 8-bit color on the camera itself, or if you're using the HDMI out, you can connect to an external recorder and use N-Log and shoot in 10-bit. Nikon is one of the oldest camera manufacturers out there, but with the Z7, they're clearly putting an eye towards the future. They've adopted so many forward-thinking technologies like wireless AC, USB-C, and support for Compact Flash Express when that finally launches. The only intimidating factor might be the price. So if you don't need that super high 45 megapixel sensor, you can opt for the Nikon Z6, which will be launching shortly and come in at about half the price and about half the resolution. Otherwise, a lot of the other specs are the same. If you want to pick up the Nikon Z7 or the Z6, you can find links below down in the description. As always, be sure to share your opinions in the comments.
If you enjoyed this video, like it and hit that subscribe button. Also, check out our price guide, which makes it extremely easy to find the best deals on Apple products updated daily. Be sure to follow us on social media, and we'll see you in the next video.